everyone, and welcome to our second Verry Terry Tuesday, a series of hangouts Crossover Media is doing throughout the month of June to celebrate the 80th birthday of minimalist music pioneer Terry Riley. Our guest today is David Skidmore, ensemble member and co-founder of Third Coast Percussion. Formed in 2005, Chicago's Third Coast Percussion has been called hard grooving by the New York Times and hailed by the New Yorker as vibrant and superb. Exploring the possibilities of percussion and exposing audiences to the percussion repertoire, Third Coast has developed an international reputation for their energy and subtle nuance in concerts and on their recordings. The group has participated in performances and residencies at New York's Metropolitan Museum of Art, the Museum of Contemporary Art in Chicago, and at the National Gallery of Art in Washington, D.C., just to name a few. Third Coast co-founder, executive director, and percussionist David Skidmore is also a composer and dedicated music advocate, having commissioned, premiered, and performed dozens of new works by many of the great 20th and 21st century composers. Thanks again to David for joining us on this Verry Terry Tuesday hangout.
Hi, David. Thanks for being our guest today on Verry Terry Tuesday.
Hi, thank you for having me.
Beyond my introduction, can you just tell us a little bit about Third Coast Percussion, its goals, and the members?
Sure. So Third Coast Percussion has been around for about 10 years, and we're a quartet. The other members are Sean Connors, Peter Martin, and Robert Dillon. And we formed because we loved percussion chamber music, and we wanted to bring it to as many people as possible. And so that's what we've been doing ever since about 2005. And most recently, we've been planning this big performance of Terry Riley's In C.
Now, our focus today on Verry Terry Tuesday is what it means to play Terry Riley's music, essentially the musician's perspective on the music. Can you give us some insights on that?
Sure, sure. I'm hearing my voice. Sorry, I was hearing my voice.
Are you okay?
I'll just start talking over it. So basically, we started playing Terry Riley's In C several years ago because one of the main activities that Third Coast Percussion does is, when we'll offer a concert like at a university, for instance, we'll also offer a residency. And having played Terry Riley's In C several times when we were, coming up as students and that sort of thing, we knew of the piece, and we knew of it as a way to make our music very inclusive, which has always been something that's very important to us as an ensemble, something we really believe in. And really the spirit of In C for us is all about inclusion. It's a piece that, of course, can be played by any number of players. And it has this wonderful sort of flexibility to it, which is very beautiful and in some ways very rare for concert music. The idea that any instrument could play the piece, and that a really wide range of a number of players could perform the piece is very interesting to us. And so we've actually done it a number of times. When we would be visiting a college or university, we would sort of send them rehearsal instructions ahead of time, and we would show up on campus and then do a big performance with a bunch of students and other faculty members. And so the performance that we'll be doing next week is a little bit of an outgrowth of that. We're bringing together a group of actually over 100 musicians from all over Chicago to perform the piece with us in honor of Riley's 80th birthday.
Can you tell us something? Can you tell us about the players? And I know that you're bringing together Chicago's best jazz, classical, rock players, as well as university musicians and even younger musicians. So are all of these people comprising the 80-person, or is it 100 people?
Yeah, our goal actually was to have 80 people perform with us. And part of what was so amazing about this is that the response has been so overwhelming and positive that we've ended up with well over 80 people. You know, we started by asking, you know, our closest friends and colleagues who are really from a wide range of different genres or disciplines, depending on how you sort of divide these things up. Of course, we asked other classically trained musicians. So we've got, for instance, Spectral Quartet, a really wonderful string quartet in town. You know, friends of ours who play in various orchestras, like Civic Orchestra, the Metropolitan, or sorry, the Lyric Opera Orchestra, the San Francisco Symphony. But what we soon found is that our other friends who were, you know, more closely associated with the jazz world or the rock world or the sort of post-rock world were just as interested in this piece and in taking part in the performance. So, for instance, we've got a handful of people from Mukapatsa. It's really amazing sort of punk rock marching band that's in town. It tours all over the place. They're going to take part. Some really fine jazz musicians, including Matt Ulery and Mike Reed. And some members of Snarky Puppy who are the sort of second half of the show that we're playing on. They're all familiar with the piece. They all love the piece, and so they're all interested in taking part.
Right. So this will be at Millennium Park, and it'll be the day after Terry's 80th birthday. Right.
That's right. Yeah. So he turns 80 on June 24th, and this concert's on June 25th.
Will he be in attendance? You know.
Sorry, say that again.
Will he be there?
I don't believe he's able to be there. He's got, of course, a lot of exciting stuff happening for his 80th birthday. So, yeah, we're hoping to connect with him, maybe get some kind of a video connection with him, you know, before the performance. But right, that's right. Yeah, yeah, he's unfortunately not able to be there.
So let's talk about In C a bit, get a little bit more into it. What are the instruments used in this piece?
So, you know, one of the revolutionary ideas of In C is that it's a piece that can be for any instrumentation. So essentially, any musical instrument can take part, including the human voice. So in our particular performance, we're going to have, of course, a lot of percussion, piano. We're going to have 6 harp players, several accordion players, a number of winds brass and string players, electric guitars, synthesizers. It's going to be a really huge collection. And then I'll be laying down the famous pulse on the pulsing eighth note C's that sort of helps to tie the whole thing together.
Right. That is glockenspiel. Will you be playing the eighth note?
Yes, exactly.
And you know, I want to get to that in a minute, but one question before that: is it true that the piece is written or transposed in several different keys?
Well, we actually created transposing parts so that if you play a transposing instrument, you'd be able to join in the performance. If you play a trumpet, for instance, which is a transposing instrument, you know, we've created parts so that you know, you can read a part that will sound in C, so that you'll be in the right key with everybody else.
You know, I would say the performance notes are incredibly interesting, and I'm wondering if this is the first time that a composer wrote notes like this. This is the first time a piece had such specific, and you know, it's really interesting in the sense that the duration is specified, you know, how long the piece should take to play, and that each pattern, of course, the piece is a series of patterns, and players should play these patterns for 45 to 50 seconds each and so forth. It's the first time.
Well, you know, and some of those performance instructions are, that we created a blog post with performance instructions partially just to sort of, well, basically just to make sure that the performance is as successful as possible. So Riley says in his performance instructions that are provided with the score, you know, certain things, like there are 53 patterns, and they vary from very short to, you know, longer musical phrase. And one of the things he says specifically is that no matter how many players you have, you know, you should try to stay within 2 to 3 patterns of one another. You go through the patterns in order. So if you're playing pattern 25 and you hear someone playing pattern 20, for instance, then you need to stay on 25 for just a little while until everyone catches up with you. And what we've done with our blog post, you know, because we've got now at this point over 100 musicians and they're from all over the place, and we only have one rehearsal, we created some more specific instructions to sort of just make sure that everything sounds great and that the spirit of the piece is there. So, you know, we've sort of like given ideas of how long to play each pattern so that we can control the duration a little bit, because we're also at the mercy of the concert hall. And if we did like a 3-hour-long performance of In C, then we'd get in a lot of trouble with the city of Chicago. So, so what we're doing really is, I mean, you know, I think really, you know, celebrating the spirit of the piece, which has a great deal of freedom, especially compared to most other concert music. You know, no two performances, of course, are ever the same, because every individual player, even with 100 players, is deciding for themselves when they want to move from one pattern to the next. And they're deciding even things like, you know, what dynamic they want to play, or how they want to articulate something if they're playing on an instrument that can control articulation. So there's still a ton of freedom, but, you know, we sort of, you know, create guidelines, just like any piece of music, whether it's notated or not, to make it a cohesive ensemble rather than just anarchy.
Right. So it is notated, but there's all this improvisation in it. So how is it notated? How is it written out? What does it look like? What does the score look like?
Sure. It's one sheet of paper, in spite of the fact that it's this 45, you know, piece that can be 45 minutes to an hour and a half long or longer. The whole piece is on one sheet of paper. So what you've got is 53 different short musical ideas, kind of listed, you know, one right after the other, not unlike more typically notated piece. There's little, you know, breaks, little in between each of the musical ideas, and repeat signs on each of them, so that the performer knows that they can play this first pattern 10 times, 15 times, 20 times if they want to, before moving on to the next one. And even within that, there's some freedom, you know. Riley says you can skip a pattern if you want to, and you can change the rhythm to make it twice as slow if it, you know, it fits better that way on your instrument, that sort of thing. You can play in any octave that you want to. So it's really, it's amazing in two ways. One, that it's still such a fresh and interesting idea, and that the performances of the piece are so inspiring and so captivating for audiences, I think. But maybe even more impressive to think of the piece, you know, when it was premiered now over 50 years ago, and how different it was from the prevailing concert music of the time, where, if anything, composers were trying to set every single parameter and make every single aspect of a performance controlled by the composer. You know, here was Riley saying, you know, let the performer have some leeway and let the performer make some decisions in the moment about how to shape a performance.
And I guess he gives the ultimate instruction that musicians love to hear or should hear, which is listen first, then play.
Right. Exactly. I mean, that's what's funny is that that's just a good rule of thumb for any musician, for any piece of music. yeah, and so there's something really lovely, I think, about the fact that this piece reminds us of what's maybe just a universal musical principle.
And let's talk about how the piece should end. So I guess you arrive at pattern number 53. I guess everyone has to arrive at pattern number 53 together, or how does?
No, what happens is, let's say you're playing the piece and you get to pattern number 53, and maybe you're the first one there. You just continue to play pattern number 53 until all of the rest of the musicians are also on pattern 53. And this is another bit where Riley, you know, has performance instructions. Sometimes they almost feel more like suggestions, the way that he phrases them. But he says, you know, once everyone's arrived at pattern 53, then you crescendo together and decrescendo together. And so there's a couple of these sort of swells that happen. And then at a certain point, everyone just starts to fade out, and that's the end of the piece.
The glockenspiel also ends the piece, right? So everyone fades out, and then that glockenspiel continues to play eighth notes, and is that what ends the piece finally?
Right, yeah, exactly. So again, I think that there's a little bit of freedom and flexibility with this. You know, one interesting thing about the pulsing, which we're doing on glockenspiels, often done on piano or some other percussion instrument, is that you know, that's an idea that may have come from another composer. So Steve Reich, another famous composer who's associated with the term minimalism, premiered this piece. He was one of the performers who played on the first performance of Terry Riley's in C. And Reich, as a percussionist, sort of suggested that there be this regular pulse to keep the ensemble together. Whereas Riley's original intention was that there not be a pulse, and that the piece have a sort of a gentler side to it, and a little bit less strict in the way that it's fits together, which I find really interesting. So we're doing a version with the pulse, which I think is, you know, now that's how what the score sort of instructs, and I think it's more typically done that way. But it can also be done without the pulse. So, you know, here you have another area where this piece is flexible and sort of a living, breathing thing where it can really be different from performance to performance.
Getting back to Third Coast for a moment, you guys do some really interesting collaborations, and you've collaborated with orchestras and singers and dancers, but also architects and astronomers. What do you see? What do you see as the future of? Where do you see music going? What are some of the fantasies you have about the future of music and where you'd like to take it? What you'd like to see? I know that you've developed apps and you know, have various new media aspects as part of your performances.
Yeah, I mean, that's a interesting and complicated question, but I think that all the things that you mentioned are things that we're passionate about, the four of us. Collaboration, I think, is something that musicians have been doing for as long as people have been playing music. You know, you can play music together, you can play music on your own, or you can play it with words, you know, and then you're collaborating with a poet or a librettist. You can perform a concert work, or you can perform a stage theatrical, you know, music work, an opera or a music theater piece, and then you're collaborating with a playwright. Some of the collaborations we've done recently are, I think, at least on the surface, they're less orthodox. So we've had a wonderful collaboration with the College of Engineering at the University of Notre Dame, where we're ensemble in residence. And you know, through that collaboration, we've had new instruments invented for our ensemble, and we've done a couple of performance projects that we wouldn't have been able to do without, you know, these collaborators. But for us, that's just a way to create new music that we're inspired by and to sort of increase the capacity of what we're able to do. So when we have worked with astronomers, it introduces new ideas about the music that we love. And when we work with engineers, it's created new instruments for us, or again, new ways of thinking about the music that we play. And I think that if anything, something that's happening now, and I hope will continue to happen, is people are taking advantage of some of the technology that's so readily available and making it a part of the concert music experience. So you mentioned apps. It's so ubiquitous now. Mobile phones and devices where people can download these apps for free or very inexpensive. And so we've created a couple of these to give our fans and audience members who come to our concerts an opportunity to experience the music that we're so passionate about in a different way. So we've got, for instance, an app where anyone who downloads it, and download it for free, can create their own performance of John Cage's early work Quartet, choose which instruments each player is playing. And this really actually ties right back to Terry Riley's NC. What's interesting for us as artists right now, four of us in Third Coast Percussion, is that we'll always be, highly trained musicians who go up on stage and perform, often difficult and complicated, and often beautiful and intricate music. But percussion is the one instrument where there's a real easy point of entry for anybody. Like, anyone can make a sound on any of the instruments that we play on stage. And we love that. And we love the idea that we can make our performances and the teaching that we do inclusive and give everyone an opportunity to participate.
David, thank you so much for joining us today for Verry Terry Tuesday. I really learned a lot from the conversation. I think everybody watching did as well.
Thank you. This has been fun.
Great. I want to let everybody know, please feel free to watch this hangout again on Crossover Media's YouTube page. We've also got a nice website where you can find out about the latest on our artists and music news. Great downloadable interview material on our SoundCloud page. Please like us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter, and we'll see you next time. David, thank you again.
Thank you. Thanks so much.